I was camping in the woods last summer, something I'd done a dozen times before. But this trip felt different from the moment we set up our tents. There was an odd stillness in the air, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. The forest seemed quieter than usual, like everything was waiting for something, watching. We were gathered around the campfire when it first happened. At first, I thought I was just hearing things, a soft whisper, barely audible, like someone was calling my name. Jess, Jess, it repeated, like a breath caught in the wind. I turned to my friends, asking if they heard it too, but they just laughed, saying I was imagining things. But as the night grew darker, the whispers grew louder, closer. I thought it was just the wind or animals in the woods, but there was something unsettling about it. It felt personal. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the crackling fire, but the whispers wouldn't stop. They started coming from all directions, as if the trees themselves were speaking. Jess, come closer. We know you. Come. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up, my pulse quickening. It wasn't right. It wasn't just the wind or an animal. These whispers were deliberate, like someone or something was trying to lure me into the woods. Jess, you don't belong here. Come find us. I stood up, trying to shake off the dread that was creeping into my chest. I'm going to check it out, I said, half joking, half terrified. My friends laughed it off, saying it was probably just the wind, or maybe an owl. But I knew something was wrong. The whispers were too clear, too direct. Stay by the fire, one of them called after me. But I couldn't. I had to know what it was. I had to find the source. My legs moved before my brain could stop them. I stepped away from the warm glow of the campfire, the dark woods swallowing the light behind me. The whispers were no longer just in the wind. They were louder, more insistent. Jess, come closer. You're almost there. I kept walking, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath shallow. The air around me grew thick and damp. My feet barely made a sound as they crunched over the leaves, and yet the forest seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something. I don't know how long I walked. Time seemed to stretch, the woods growing darker and more oppressive with every step. The whispers were all around me now, like they were coming from inside my head. You're almost here, Jess. Just a little farther. The trees seemed to close in, their twisted branches reaching out like fingers. I wanted to stop, but I couldn't. It was like I was being pulled forward, against my will. The path before me was narrowing, and the whispers grew louder, more desperate. Then suddenly I stopped. I don't know why. It was like something inside me told me to halt. There was a figure in front of me, standing just beyond the reach of my flashlight. It wasn't a person. Not really. It was tall, unnaturally tall. Its limbs were too long, too thin, and its head was too large. Its body seemed to be covered in shadows, the darkness pooling around it like liquid. But its eyes, I couldn't see its eyes. There was nothing there but blackness, as if they were never meant to be seen. Jess. The whisper came again, but it wasn't from the wind anymore. It was from that thing. It was using my voice. Jess, come closer. My body went cold. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I was frozen in place, trapped in the gaze of whatever it was. The air around me felt thick, like it was pressing against my chest. I couldn't breathe. And then, it spoke again, closer this time. Its voice a low, rasping whisper that sounded like it was coming from the depths of my soul. You should have stayed by the fire. It's too late now. In that moment, I felt like I was going to suffocate. My vision blurred, and everything around me seemed to spin. My legs gave out from under me, and I collapsed to the ground, unable to stand. The last thing I remember was the darkness closing in, the whispers growing louder, until everything went silent. I woke up back at the camp, lying on the ground with my friends hovering over me, their faces full of concern. They said I'd passed out from exhaustion, but I know what happened. I know what I saw. They didn't hear the whispers. They didn't see the figure. But I did. And every time I go camping now, I swear I can still hear them. Faintly, just at the edge of my hearing. The whispers calling my name, coming from the depths of the woods. I've never gone back to those woods, and I don't think I ever will. I never believed in ghost stories. I always thought they were fun, sure, but deep down, I knew they weren't real. That's what made them enjoyable. There was always that comforting thought in the back of my mind. None of this is real. That thought died the night we went to Alex's cabin. It was supposed to be a normal weekend. Just me, Alex, Sam, and Sam's younger brother, Ethan. 4 guys hanging out in the woods, drinking, grilling, and telling stupid stories. The cabin had been in Alex's family for decades, a deep woods hunting retreat his grandfather built back in the 1950s. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, no neighbors, just trees, miles and miles of trees. The first night was fine. We got the fire going, told dumb stories, and laughed until we couldn't breathe. The second night? That was the night everything changed. It started with a knock, a single sharp knock at the front door. Knock, knock. We all froze. Alex frowned. Who the hell would be out here? I glanced at Sam, but he was just as confused as I was. Nobody should be this deep in the woods. Ethan, the youngest of us, was already pale. What if it's a ranger? He whispered. Alex scoffed. A ranger? At almost midnight? Sam shrugged. Maybe someone got lost? That was the only explanation that made sense. Alex hesitated for a second, then stood up and grabbed the flashlight. I'll check. We all watched as he walked toward the door. He stood there for a moment, took a breath, then called out, "Hello?" Silence. No answer. No footsteps. No sound of movement at all. I felt my stomach tighten. Alex sighed. Fine. He flicked on the flashlight and unbolted the door. The second it swung open, the cold night air rushed in. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the trees. Nothing. Just endless blackness. Alex stepped onto the porch, sweeping the light left and right. If this is a joke, it's not funny. Still, nothing. After a moment, he sighed and stepped back inside. Whatever. Let's go back to the fire. And for a while, we did. But then, at 11:58 p.m., it happened again. We were just about to turn in for the night when we heard it. Knock, knock. But this time, it wasn't at the front door. It came from the window. Ethan stiffened. That was inside the porch. He was right. To knock on that window, someone had to walk past the front door, step onto the porch, and stand right next to the glass. Alex's face went pale. He grabbed the flashlight again. His hand was shaking. He flicked it on and shined it at the window. Nothing. But I swear, in the shadows beyond the trees, I saw something move. A tall, thin shape shifting in the darkness. Sam cursed under his breath. We're locking the doors. Alex didn't argue. We bolted every door, every window. We grabbed the biggest knives we could find from the kitchen and sat together in the living room, whispering theories. A bear? Ethan muttered. Alex shook his head. No bear knocks twice. Then what? Nobody answered. Then, at exactly 12:15 a.m., the knocking started again. Knock. Knock. From the back door. I felt a cold shiver crawl down my spine. Ethan gripped his knife. That's not a person. Sam's hands were shaking. If they come inside, I'm stabbing first and asking questions later. Alex whispered, we need to wait it out till morning. We all agreed. But the knocking didn't stop. Every few minutes, knock, knock. Sometimes at the front door, sometimes at the windows, sometimes at the walls. Like something was circling the cabin, like it was playing with us. At 1:47 a.m., the knocking stopped. The whole forest went silent. No knocking, no wind, not even crickets. Just nothing. And that's when we heard the breathing. The breathing was inside the cabin. Slow, deliberate. Not ours. It came from the corner of the room. My whole body locked up. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Alex turned his head slowly, his breathing shallow. And that's when we saw it. A tall, thin figure standing in the darkest corner of the room. It had been in there with us the entire time. I couldn't see its face, just a pale, skeletal form, motionless in the shadows. Ethan made a noise, a choked, gasping sound, like he was trying not to scream. Sam didn't move, didn't blink. The fire flickered, and for a split second, the thing's face became visible. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin, stretched too tightly over its skull. Then, in the darkness, it moved. A long, bony hand lifted off the ground, and it knocked. Knock, knock. On the floor, right next to Ethan's foot. He lost it, screamed, jumped to his feet, and bolted for the door. The second his hand touched the doorknob, the thing lunged. But Ethan yanked the door open, and we all ran. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. We piled in, locked the doors, and Alex gunned it down the dirt road. Nobody spoke. Nobody looked back. But as we hit the highway, I made the mistake of glancing in the rearview mirror, and I saw it, standing at the edge of the forest, watching us leave. And just before it disappeared into the trees, it raised its hand. Knock, knock. I never thought I'd be one of those people who had a creepy camping story. You know the type. Friends sitting around the fire telling spooky tales about things that go bump in the night. It always sounded like exaggeration to me. Until that night. That damn night. It started like any other camping trip. I've been out in the woods more times than I can count. My friends and I were looking forward to a weekend of hiking, fishing, and of course, telling ghost stories around the fire. The forest was thick and silent, like it had its own secret rhythm. But that night, there was something different. Something off. The air was heavy, like a storm was about to hit, even though the sky was clear. The trees stood still. No rustling of leaves, no movement in the branches. It was like the forest was holding its breath. That's the only way I can describe it. Quiet. Eerie. As we set up camp, I tried to shake the feeling gnawing at the back of my mind. I was supposed to be relaxing, having a good time, but the silence was unnerving. It felt like we were being watched. The longer we stayed, the heavier the silence became. We gathered around the campfire, the only source of light in the surrounding darkness, and tried to enjoy the night. Laughter and stories flowed freely at first, but then, that's when I first heard it. A whisper. So soft, so faint, I thought it was just the wind. But as the seconds passed, I realized it was no gust of wind. No, this whisper was too deliberate, too clear. Jack, Jack. I froze. My breath caught in my throat, and I looked around, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe an animal, I thought. But it wasn't. It wasn't the wind or an animal. It was someone, something, calling my name. I turned to my friends, laughing nervously. Did you guys hear that? They looked at me with raised eyebrows. What? You okay, man? I shook it off, forcing a smile. But as the night grew darker, the whispers came again. Jack, come closer. We've been waiting. I froze, my blood running cold. I looked at the others again, but they were too busy with their own conversations. None of them seemed to hear it. Maybe it was all in my head. But it didn't feel like that. It didn't feel like just some random noise. It felt personal, like it was meant only for me. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the fire. but every time the wind rustled the trees, I could hear it. Closer this time. Jack, we know you. Come closer. My pulse quickened, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. My skin tingled with dread, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. Not yet. I needed to figure out what was happening, what I was hearing. I stood up suddenly, the words slipping out of my mouth before I could think. I'll go check it out, I said, forcing a joke. See what the woods are hiding. My friends laughed, but I could see it in their eyes. They were just as unsettled as I was. Stay by the fire, one of them called after me, but I couldn't. I had to know what was happening. The woods felt different now, darker somehow. The trees seemed to lean in, their branches stretching toward me, twisting like they were trying to grab me. I moved slowly at first, hesitant, but something inside me, something deep down, was pushing me forward. I couldn't stop myself. The further I walked, the stronger the whispers became. Jack, you're almost there. Just a little farther. It was no longer just the wind. It wasn't an animal. The whispers were real, and they were calling me. I stepped deeper into the woods, the path narrowing, the air growing heavier. I tried to turn back, but my feet wouldn't listen. My legs moved on their own, like they were being dragged forward. The darkness was suffocating, pressing in from all sides, and I could barely breathe. The whispers circled me, now all around me, louder, more urgent. Jack, you belong with us. Just a little farther. Every instinct in my body screamed for me to run, but I couldn't. It was like the forest itself was holding me prisoner. Then, without warning, I stopped. I don't know why. Something inside me told me to stop, to listen, and when I did, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving in sync with my own. I turned, my flashlight trembling in my hand, and that's when I saw it. A figure stood in the shadows, just outside the beam of my light. It was tall, too tall. Its body stretched unnaturally, limbs too thin, too long. The air around it seemed to warp, like the darkness itself was bending around its shape. I couldn't see its face. It was just dark, a shadow. And yet, I felt its gaze. It was as if its eyes were pulling me in, digging deep into my soul. The whispers grew louder, but they were no longer coming from the trees. No, they were coming from it. Jack, the thing whispered, its voice low, like a growl from deep within the earth. You shouldn't have come. You should have stayed by the fire. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't listen. The whispers echoed in my skull, louder and louder, like they were coming from inside my head. The world around me started to spin, my vision blurring. Then, in a voice so deep, so twisted, I heard it again. Too late now. I don't know what happened after that. The next thing I remember, I was lying on the ground, back at camp. My friends were standing over me, their faces full of concern. Dude, you okay? You passed out. They said I'd collapsed from exhaustion. They didn't hear the whispers. They didn't see the thing. They didn't understand. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And every time I close my eyes, I can hear it. The whispers. Soft at first, but growing louder. Closer. And I'm terrified to go back into the woods, because I know the whispers are still waiting. And next time, they might not let me go. That was just the beginning. For weeks after that night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At night, I'd lie in bed, eyes wide open, my heart racing. The whispers would return in the silence of the dark. They weren't as loud or clear as before, but they were always there, just at the edge of my hearing. Jack, come back. Come find us. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself that it was my mind playing tricks. But deep down, I knew better. The feeling of that thing in the woods, the way it stared at me, the way the air thickened around it, wouldn't leave me. The longer I ignored it, the more real it felt. It wasn't until a month later, when I took a walk through a different part of the woods near my house, that I knew I couldn't run from it anymore. It was late afternoon, the sun low in the sky, and the forest was quiet, still, too quiet. I felt it before I saw it. The same oppressive feeling, like something was just beyond my sight, waiting for the right moment. I turned to leave, but then the whispers returned. Not loud this time, but close. In my ear, almost like a breath. "Jack, it's time." I froze, my blood turning to ice. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I knew what was there. I ran, and every step I took, I heard it. Closer, faster, like it was right behind me. "Jack, come closer." I don't know how far I ran. My lungs burned and my legs ached. But no matter how fast I went, I couldn't escape the sound. The whispers chased me until I stumbled into the clearing near the old cabin. That's when I realized. The thing. The whispers. They weren't after me. They were waiting for me. And now they knew I could hear them. They wouldn't stop. I haven't been back to the woods since. But the whispers, they never stopped. And they never will.